Hey guys, thank you for stopping by. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. And I hope you enjoyed this interview. All right, welcome back to the program. My guest is joining me now. He's Kelvin Emmanuel. He's an economist, and we're looking at the state of Nigeria economy. Welcome, Kelvin, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I like your smile this morning, so broad.
Thank you.
Now, let's get started. Let's begin with President Tinubu's presence at the special meeting of the World Economic Forum in Saudi Arabia. I guess, of course, you would have seen snippets from that where he did talk about the removal of petrol subsidy, that he needed to do that because the country would not have money, will go bankrupt. What do you actually think?
Well,
bearing in mind that there's still subsidy.
I think, it's like a statement that is impressive for the IMF. It's what the IMF and the World Bank wants to hear, global investors wants to hear, because Nigeria was practically running a socialist state, subsidizing electricity, subsidizing foreign exchange. By the time Tinubu took over, CBN was paying maybe $320 million every month in FX subsidy, I would tell you that his efforts are trying to unify the exchange rates, albeit not up there as we expect, has been a little bit impressive. What Cardozo has done at the central bank has really been impressive, even if, the Naira is still trying to find the forward curve and the official and parallel market rate is still trying to close up, and you have supply side issues with the FX rates, and it's affecting inflation, it's affecting petroleum supply, petrol supply. I got very reliable information that the shortage of cargoes imported petrol into Nigeria, and the NNPC is trying to prioritize the North Central, the seat of power, and some part of the Southwest.
That's why we saw some kind of scarcity.
Exactly.
So it's logistics.
It's logistics. It's also the fact that there's a distortion in price. Crude oil price has gone up, the exchange rates at which it's pegged. The only way you can have petrol price at under 600 Naira ex-depot is if exchange rate and crude oil price stays at anywhere around $82 per barrel to $85 per barrel, and if the exchange rate stays at anywhere around 850 to 880. At these current levels, the government is still paying subsidy on premium motor spirits.
So sorry to cut you short. That brings me to the next question of, for President Tinubu to say, okay, we had to remove fuel subsidy so that we don't go bankrupt and to set the economy on positive trajectory. And I saw he was seated there with Kristalina Georgieva, who is the IMF chief, and some others, the president of Rwanda, the prime minister of Malaysia, and all of that, and even for experts in the room. Do you think, does President Tinubu think that those people don't know what is actually happening, that there's still subsidy, as it were? President Tinubu was also just trying to be a bit political.
Well, to be honest with you, considering the fact that, they've come up with the Band-A to Band-D thing, I don't even want to go into electricity because that is another issue entirely. And they're practically trying to remove subsidy on electricity. They remove subsidy on FX. Now is not the right time, to remove subsidy 100% on Nigerians are going through the ringer.
Subsidy 100% on what? On
like the existing subsidy on petrol. Number one, you have to actually audit the demand. Because, it's my opinion that Nigeria doesn't consume up to 35 million liters of PMS per day. The government says currently they consume 41 million liters. I think that still needs to drop another maybe 10 million liters.
During Buhari's era, we were told about 70 million liters, 65, right, which the customs at that time also contested.
Right. So, you need to start from the basics and the fundamentals. But then the question comes back to this. You have a commercial refiner in Nigeria. Dangote can do 650,000 barrels per day in processing capacity. And at full capacity utilization, he'll be doing about 52 million liters of PMS on a daily basis. He'll be doing about 28 million liters of diesel and about 14 million liters of Jet A1. But the question now becomes, according to domestic crude oil supply obligations, can NNPC supply Dangote with the crude oil feedstock he needs today? No. They can't. Can the IOCs and the NOCs supply Dangote with the crude oil feedstock he needs today? fully, no. And the reason is because they already have for sale agreements that has been signed 5 years, 7 years, 10 years for the stock they get.
So that's why you're saying Dangote also imports.
Exactly. Their inability to supply that stock means they have to go into force majeure. So NNPC has, for sale agreement, the Project Gazelle, which I think is not very clear. There are a lot of questions NNPC has to answer on Project Gazelle. That's why you have a situation whereby even the $1.7 billion in feedstock NNPC owes Dangote Refinery based on the 10%, 20% equity they hold in the refinery for 300,000 barrels per day for a period of time. They can't provide it. So if you have Dangote importing heavy crude oil with API that is less than 30 degrees and can produce more transportation fuels than MONEYLINE, you have a situation where he incurs a 28% landing cost and is not able to equalize the price of PMS to Nigerians. This is the issue.
So how do you think we can get out of this? Because the government has not come out fully to actually say that we are subsidizing fuel for Nigerians. I bought fuel, was it last week, at 718 naira at one of the fuel stations here in Asokoro. And by the time I just drove how many minutes, I saw that my meter was like just a little bit below the full tire. I was like, where did I just go to? I just left. So I don't even know what is in the fuel that they are selling now. But that's an issue for another day. How do you now expect us to balance this out? Because you see in the federal government that it's not politically willing to say we are still incurring subsidy. Where's that money coming from? Perhaps the NNPC is also, paying that cost of subsidy. Because we've seen that also happen in the past, whereby NNPC actually said, we are paying for this subsidy. That's why we can't even remit to central bank, for example. But under this administration, Cardoso and Mele Kyari have come together to say, okay, let's look for a framework. I think they came up with something to have either a department or so that looks at NNPC's books and how much, not NNPC's books as it were, but effects from crude to go directly to the central bank. So how does the federal government really balance this out? And do you think that there is an elastic moment for the federal government at the end? Because it's still paying subsidy, but we really do not know officially now from where.
Listen, Nancy,
or do you know?
I would tell you that there are fundamental issues that needs to be changed for us to change this system that we currently operate. We like cosmetic solutions too much. For one, I honestly believe, and this is what I've always said, that we need a full restructuring of NNPC. The presidency needs to hand off control of NNPC. NNPC is no longer a state oil company. NNPC is a private company limited by shares. NNPC should have an independent board that does not report to the president, that does not report to his chief of staff, that does not report to the Minister of Petroleum, that reports to the board that are appointed by the shareholders of the company. Okay? NNPC needs to go into being run by an asset manager. The shares that the FGN hold should be warehoused by an asset manager. And who is the asset manager? Ministry of Finance Incorporated. Nancy, explain to me how, for example, NLNG is still being managed, the shares of the FGN is still being managed by NNPC. What's the correlation? When you have an asset manager managing it, they are business-oriented. Their goal is to maximize shareholder value. So what are the issues? How can NNPC ensure that it transforms into a full business entity that is not being controlled, right? And that can focus on solving these issues Nigerians have. For example, I'll tell you, this is my personal view, Nancy. I don't believe NNPC should be in the downstream business. According to PIA of 2021, August 2021, that was signed by President Buhari, by ex-President Buhari, NNPC is not supposed to control more than 30% of the downstream sector. But today, NNPC controls at least 80% of the downstream sector.
Because you see Nigerians going there to buy fuel because it's dependable, as it were, and the price is better.
That's the point.
So it shouldn't be an operator and a regulator and whatever it is. Whatever it is.
Exactly. The fact that NNPC controls most of the downstream market means that the government is still providing under recovery on PMS.
That's the word.
right?
recovery.
For you to equalize petrol prices and ensure that there is a guarantee of supply to Nigerians. Now, Nigerians are able to stomach the current price, which is not convenient for them, right? Because they've watched their, they've seen demand destruction. They've watched their income, the value of their income go to nothing. Food inflation is 40%. For them to be able to survive, they at least need a guarantee of supply. You don't expect Nigerians to be queuing 7 hours for petrol. And how you can ensure that is to make sure you're able to fulfill the domestic crude oil supply obligation. Dangote has a refinery. Why are we not supplying him crude oil he needs?
But there are challenges too. You just talked about it.
Exactly. So, and it comes
and all
back
that.
to NNPC. Why is NNPC not able to provide the crude oil feedstock that Dangote needs? And
But
the
we have
question,
insecurity issues and co.
there are insecurity
Yes,
issues.
good.
There are also the fact that, Nancy, today, Nigeria has the highest unit production cost per barrel. $48 per barrel is the highest in the world. Libya is currently fighting a civil war, Nancy. But their unit production cost per barrel is $9.70. Iraq has been fighting a civil war since 2001 when they bombed the World Trade and when terrorists bombed the World Trade Center. Their unit production cost is $10.57 per barrel. How can Nigeria in peacetime have the highest unit production cost per barrel? And this makes the JV cash call NNPC has to pay so high. And it makes the income that comes to the federal government low. These are the fundamental issues we have to tackle to be able to free the feedstock that NNPC gets.
Okay, let's take a look. You've mentioned a lot of stuff. Of course, electricity subsidy gone. Telecoms now. There are also discussions around the telcos having cost-reflective tariffs. We've known that at least the likes of the big telecom companies have actually been saying that they do not also have cost-reflective tariffs, bearing in mind what has been happening. With all of this that is going on, do you think that President Tinubu is recalibrating Nigeria's economy? Do you think that at the end of the day, he's determined to build strong fundamentals? President Tinubu's administration is just slowly getting to 1 year in office.
I'll tell you that I'm impressed with what Cardozo has done, the leeway he's giving Cardozo to work, with the reforms that he's championed. I'm impressed with the way he's been able to recalibrate the banking sector, the recapitalization guidelines, the FX market, net open position, second check, the BDCs, how he's been able to manage them, the fact that he didn't ban them, but he disbarred some, most of them, and then brought back some, and is signaling to the market supply to the BDCs, and is changing their regulatory sandbox. However, I'm not impressed with the way Wale Edun is pulling up on the fiscal side, because I expect that by now we'll be talking about restructuring the tax code to harmonize taxes to not more than 10, like
but that's the
was suggested.
Oyedele's committee.
It's not been implemented.
Work is ongoing.
It's not been implemented. I think Oyedele has submitted his report to the president, if I'm not mistaken. I expect that by now they should have collapsed the revenue collection functions of 62 MDAs to the Federal Inland Revenue Service as a one-stop shop. And we should be talking about reforms of how custom collects revenues on behalf of the government. So you can't place all the pressure. I saw the video that where the spokesperson for the CBN was talking about the fact that they're prioritizing fighting inflation over high unemployment. And you see, you can't place all the pressure on the central bank by saying that if inflation goes up, they're going to keep raising rate. Because every time they raise the rate, the prime lending rate goes up, the commercial lending rate goes up. And the tendency is that when you raise the rates, the MPR is so high, the non-performing loan book of the banks go up in a year where you're asking them to recapitalize. And you're saying that they can't use revaluation gains and additional tier 1 capital to recapitalize. They have to source for capital from this. And some boards have already approved for rights issue and for raising of capital. So for me, I would tell you that the president is on the right track, but he's also doing some political calculations and saying there are some decisions he doesn't want to take immediately that might affect his chances of winning re-election in 2027.
When he's just getting close to just 1 year, come on, this politician should just give us a break. He's just like 1 year into a 4-year administration, so they're already thinking of 2027.
They're already thinking of 2027.
I understand the role of politics. I understand the role of popularism. Yes, I understand the role of being politically correct and, you know, doing a lot of stuff to get the economy on track. But President Tinubu and even the other presidential candidates gave us an inkling that they are economically minded in terms of getting our economy on track. So what you're saying now, what I hear, is that he's doing some things right, but politics also is impeding him from doing other things.
The President Tinubu I see, and the body language he has shown, he wants to push with state policy. He wants to push with fiscal federalism. But he knows if he pushes on fiscal federalism, it will affect the block of Nigerian voters that might decide his re-election in 2027. Because at the end of the day, Nancy, the real elephant in the room for Nigeria is devolving powers from the center, looking at the legislative list, the 62 items on the legislative list, exclusive, concurrent, and residual lists, looking at the principles of derivation, landmass, equity of states, IGR, derivation, and population, and restructuring the principles on which Revenue Mobilization and Fiscal Allocation Commission decides FAC. That's the real meat.
That's political economy.
That's political economy. And it takes a lot of political capital. If you push through with that reform, you're going to drain on your political capital. So the question is, does the president have the political will to risk it? Is he willing to risk it? Is he weighing it and asking himself, if I risk it, am I going to come in 2027?
Perhaps I should be a one-term president.
But this is the issue with
and
Nigeria.
risk these reforms.
This is the issue with Nigeria. This is the issue with Nigeria because at the end of the day, we always put political expediency over policy making.
What do you think is the single biggest risk now that is facing the Nigerian economy? The single biggest risk amid the potpourri of what we're saying, what we're battling with right now?
I think the single biggest risk is the macroeconomic fundamentals that is impeding businesses. A lot of business boards of companies will tell you that they don't know what the outlook will be for 2024, December. They don't know where the exchange rate is going to be. They don't know where inflation is going to be. They don't know where the existing loans they have, where the rates are going to revise to, dependency on the rates are going to be revised to. They don't know if they should invest or not.
Even with the signal that President Tinubu is giving, why will they say that? Isn't there some kind of certainty as against President Buhari's 8 years?
I'll tell you, the Nigerian economy has improved dramatically, not as we expect. It's way better than it was under President Buhari because Tinubu is trying to repair.
Because President Buhari did not have the lever to take off fuel subsidy. President Tinubu did that on his first day in office.
Which was the right decision. I stand by it. We were here in the studio.
Exactly. But that has actually made everything snowball. Inflation 33.2%, Naira yo-yos movement, cost of doing business high. Many companies are closing down. Some companies are also opening up. A lot of that. So people are losing their jobs. Productivity is low.
Nancy, Tinubu and Emefiele were managing a walking corpse. Sorry, Buhari and Emefiele, they were managing a walking corpse. They handed over an empty treasury. Nigeria's debt rose from 12.6 trillion to 90 trillion in 8 years. They handed over 90 trillion naira in debt to Tinubu with 7 trillion naira interest on a yearly basis. How do you manage that?
But did you see the news? Did you see the reports from the CBN Statistics Bulletin last week that there's still ways and means ongoing now to the federal government?
There's still ways and means. Yes. But I'll tell you my position on this. But you also know that most of the monies that were raised through open money market operations, the Ministry of Finance paid off 4.8 trillion naira to the central bank in ways and means. That's about 16% of the 30.6 trillion that is owed has been securitized. My position on this is for the chairman, Senate Committee on Banking, Finance and Insurance, to go ahead with this proposal he has presented to the Senate that says the federal government cannot hold ways and means loan for more than 3 months. It must not go from advance to an overdraft. An advance incurs 0.5% a month, but as soon as it becomes an overdraft, it's MPR plus 3. So if MPR is 24.75%, it's 24.75% plus 3, which is 27.5% on a yearly basis. Then you prorate it to a monthly basis, which is very high. Okay? And he says that for them to get ways and means, they have to use their FAC, the federal government share of FAC, as a collateral. So as an ISP or independent standing payment order, so if you
which
default,
is not bad, which is
you
good.
debit automatically, and you cannot hold it and roll it over.
So it will give the fiscal people some kind of responsibility.
Exactly. to step up on tax to GDP and non-tax to GDP ratio and the collection of revenue so that you can rely less on the central bank. Because relying much on the central bank also fast tracks currency devaluation and inflation. Because if you cannot raise money through private sector CRR, public sector CRR, you have to go to printing money, which is what we saw under Buhari and MFLA.
Now, if you take a look at Naira's fluctuation, we're seeing less than 1,300 now. I don't know what it will do today at the market at the end of today's close. If you look at Naira's fluctuation recently, just the positives against perhaps electricity price increase. Also, there's a proposal for an increase for telcos, even though I think MTN now says it doesn't want to be called a telco now, but a tech co, as it were. But for telecommunication companies, Nigerians may begin to pay more. The telcos are saying cost-reflective tariffs. Also take a look at the differential in U.S. inflation rate. I think U.S. inflation is at 2.7%, if I'm not mistaken, with some other countries that have inflation, because Nigeria is an import-dependent country. Where I'm asking this question, and I hope you understand this question, is how does it all feed into the Naira moving forward? And if the distortions that we've seen around prices, electricity, what I've mentioned, it's also feeding it into the Naira.
So, you know, Naira appreciated to 980, then it bounced back. It bounced back because the central bank has not 100% implemented the circular on net open position, 0% long for banks. My suggestion to the central bank is to be very forceful, banking supervision to be very forceful, exact stiff penalties to banks that refuse to do that, and monitor them on using proxies to mop up money from the parallel markets, you know, to make money in treasury gains. That's one. I honestly think that the fact that it bounced back to 1,004 is not a reflection of fundamentals in the economy, and there is a bit of manipulation, you know. I also think
manipulation from where?
Like the major players in the market.
Who are the major players now?
The primary dealers are the major players in the market.
EFCC is also chasing. We saw what happened last week.
Yes. The primary dealers are the major players in the market. The BDCs are lagging, but the primary dealers are the major players in the market because they have volumes. That's why I think the central bank, the banking supervision, needs to be very forceful on net open positions and monitoring movement of monies through proxies. It's very important they do that. It's very important they also ask the crypto platforms to come in to, number one, remove their P2P futures on trading, and also to disclose every transaction that is done on their platform. It's very, very important that this is done. You know, I think that on a forward curve basis, we'll probably see that the rates will stabilize anywhere around maybe 1,150 to 1,200. That's where I think the rates will stabilize for a period of time. So my outlook is 1,150 to 1,200. But I also think that Nigeria is expecting that, oh, the rate drops to 1,050 or 1,000 naira to $1, and then all of a sudden tomorrow morning prices in market start to reflect. It's not realistic. And it's not realistic because there's an issue of transfer pricing on imports. You need like 60 to 90 days to correct it. So you need that market to stabilize for 90 days for you to see it reflects in the market.
In the market. Let's talk about infrastructure. What do you think with what you've seen around the infrastructure? The president, of course, has been traveling, trying to pull FDI into the country. If he's been successful with that, you're seeing issues around the Lagos-Calabar highway, government saying, of course, it has the right because it's federal government land, but you've seen also a few companies that have invested in that space losing part of their businesses. And in fact, that's actually the attraction. So what would you really say about this?
I think the Lagos-Calabar coastal project is good. I also hear the minister says that the president has asked him to look into revalidation studies for the Sokoto-Badagry coastal way. On the issue of landmark,
and some other companies,
I think it's important for there to be discussion on the engineering design for the project, and for the team, the Federal Ministry of Works, the contractor, and landmark to sit down to see how they can find a solution that works best for everyone, you know. I also think there's an issue of public procurement, you know, on the project that needs to be looked at, you know. But more importantly, I think if they're operating a build, operate, transfer, then the onus is on the government looking for independent financing for the project, where, you know, you award several contractors, maybe they raise money through infrastructure bonds, and then they get the monies back by tolling the road, you know, to recover the revenues, which is very, very viable, you know. I will say this, Nancy, and this is a bit deviation from the question you asked, but it's on infrastructure. I think if the president is really serious about infrastructure, he needs to diversify away from the western maritime flank to the eastern maritime flank. You know, there was a report recently that the Calabar ports has not received containers for like 25 years, if I'm not mistaken. The channel draft is 6 meters. Channel draft needs to be at least 12 meters because silt has taken over that channel draft over the last 20 years, you know. And now I hear that Badagry is going through validation studies for possible. Lagos has Tinkan, Apapa, Lekki, and now Badagry, 4. Lagos has the smallest landmass in Nigeria, 30,527 square kilometers, like 18 million people. Why are you not looking at Akwa Ibom that's closer, has a coastline that's closer to the Atlantic Ocean, you know, to get that port project up and running, you know, so that you can move traffic and stimulate investments in the Eastern Maritime flank. You know, so the president needs to look at, okay, yeah, roads are good, but you also need to look at port operations. There's too much concentration of port operations in Lagos.
How about the roads that are still dilapidated, East-West Road and some other roads in Nigeria that actually also need attention? A lot of people are saying, why concentrate on the Lagos-Calabar highway?
I honestly think that it's important to focus on this project. Like East-West Road is a major commercial route between Rivers State and Bayelsa State. Very major, connects Rivers, Bayelsa Delta, and, you know, all of the cars that goes through. Port Harcourt, Calabar, Port Harcourt, Akwa Ibom Road, they're very, very bad. Port Harcourt, Calabar especially is in a very bad position. But I think beyond the issue of, oh, the federal government does not have money to finance the project, or the past award, contract awards was misappropriated, the government should begin to look at PPPs, you know, build, operate, transfer, concession over a period of 30 years, get infrastructure bonds to finance the project, and then toll it. If the roads are working, the people will be happy to pay a toll.
A toll of like 3,000 naira?
Not necessarily, might not be that much, you know, because
1.5.
1.5 is better it's better the roads are functioning and are working than for them to be stuck and they're not able to move. Rain falls and then people are dying on the roads and their cars are being damaged and they're stuck and they're not able to move.
Okay, now let me ask, May Day is just by the corner. What do you think? Minimum wage issues, there's been anticipation that, okay, the federal government should raise minimum wage. I think in one of the reports earlier from Labour has actually canvassed for an increase in wage. I was reading something, was it yesterday? Also, there's a union, I think academic technologists are saying that they should increase minimum wage. Is it to 200,000 or 350,000 naira? What do you think? How do you think that the government and Labour should address? Because minimum wage in Nigeria now is $23 a month. From about when President Buhari was there, when he was leaving, I did an analysis on it, and it was $65 as at that time. Now it's $23 that an average Nigerian worker earns monthly, federal government worker.
Nigeria has 263 parastatals, 262 if I'm not mistaken. You know, they talk about implementing the Stephen Orasanye report. Beyond reducing the number of parastatals, merging and closing down some, you also need to look at public procurement and the level of fraud that goes on with public procurement in Nigeria to reduce the cost of governance, to reallocate money to the people who need money in Nigeria. The soldiers, the police officers, the teachers, the doctors, and the nurses. These are the people that need to be paid very well. So I always I am taken aback and flummoxed when this issue of minimum wage comes up and the whole attention is on government workers alone. Because, you know, minimum wage is raised, government workers, yeah. But what about the private sector workers, especially those that are not in organized labor in the private sector? What about them? This brings to fore the issue about employee casualization. There's no protection for people who are not in organized labor unions. who are not in very strict formal employment, who are in contracts that can be easily discarded at any time of the day, and they are not protected by National Industrial Court. They don't have money to hire a lawyer to fight for them at National Industrial Court. So these are issues that we need to begin, fundamental background issues we need to begin to tackle, so that we know that, okay, even if you raise the minimum wage, how does it affect the guy who is an artisan on the road?
Now, do you expect a pronouncement for President Tinubu on May 1?
Probably, I expect an announcement, but the question is, considering the structure of the budget, the 2024 budget, how are they going to finance it?
Finance it. And President Tinubu had earlier announced something about wage award, I think of 35,000 naira. That was last year or so. So where do we go from here? Just a few seconds.
The president needs to brace up. He needs to realize that he's president for only once in his life. Probably his entire family is only going to have one president for their lifetime, for their generation. This is his moment in time to do the hard things and put off political expediency at the back and take the hard decisions. He started well. He needs to take the hard decisions and continue taking the hard decisions.
And those hard decisions will be hard on us,
yes,
Kelvin.
For a while.
Okay. All right, thank you very much for joining. You're saying for a while, but it's almost like eternity now. Because when economists speak, they'll say, oh, for a while.
It will take 3 years. It will take 3 years of making very tough decisions for Nigeria to bend the corner.
I know.
Because the economy has been grossly mismanaged.
Grossly mismanaged. Thank you very much for coming.
Thanks for having
me. All right,
me.
I've been speaking with Kelvin Emmanuel, who is an economist, and we've been looking at the state of the Nigerian economy. That's the much we can take today. Please join us again tomorrow. Be the best you can be and be the change that you want to see. I am Nancy Nnaji. Bye now. Thank you for watching. In case this is your first time watching us, thank you. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, drop your comments as well as like, and most of all, share our content.